So we're going to get your blood pumping with a drum line, and then we're going to end with a mindfulness meditation after the panel, right? So we'll be all ready to go in terms of our learning mode this morning. But before we get the panel started, I wanted to have a moment to introduce you to the panelists so they have a sense of who we've got in the room this morning. And we're going to be zooming in on this conversation of, we've been talking a lot about readiness and equity, but want to really talk about what it takes to move that to scale, and looking at what we're doing around quality and social emotional learning. And we've got so many partnerships in the room that are working on that I'd like, if you are connected to the Wallace Partnerships for Social Emotional Learning Initiative, could you all stand up? We've got schools and out-of-school time partners working on that initiative, almost 100 folks in the room that are working with that from 9 districts across the country. We've also got the Altria Success 360 sites that are really working, Altria Success 360 sites, if you're here, working really in terms of just direct service work, youth organizations making this work happen in partnerships locally. We've got the Performance Partnerships pilot, really looking at how to work this on kind of a policy angle and moving this, as we've got some folks working in terms of the P3 work as well. If you're also working in community partnerships and any kind of broader change management or collective impact work, whether it's around opportunity youth or any other kind of broader community change efforts, and even if you've stood up before, go ahead and stand up now. So you can see, we're coming at this from a range of angles, and we really want to be able to have this conversation of what does it look like to do this in partnership, and also what does it look like to really be able to take these efforts to scale. And I want to kind of take you a little bit through the through story from yesterday morning's plenary with Karen and Sean yesterday afternoon, and into the conversation this morning, because yesterday Karen really put the challenge out there for us of what are we really talking about when we're talking about equity, and that it's more than leveling the playing field and removing the structural barriers, but really saying what does it take to make sure those opportunities are there, and to really provide those opportunities so that there's a chance to have that agency and really make sure that all young people are actually getting into the game. So it's taking those fences down and actually getting into the playing field. And how are we making sure that that's really happening for all of our children and youth? And then we really heard with Sean yesterday about kind of the importance of healing in this work, and how we're really looking at not just healing with our young people, but also with adults who are connected with young people and ourselves doing this work. And so many of the conversations I know in the hallways and many of the communities and just what we're working with right now have been talking about, it's young people, it's people working with them on the front line, and it's also the school administrators and the county administrators who have been, frontline workers at one point in time and are supporting those workers now, and that there's real things that are happening that we really are looking at how we approach this work and come to this with our whole selves, and what it looks like to really be able to come to this work in a way that is bringing our whole person. We heard so much of that from Sean yesterday, and we're talking about how to bring that and say, how do you do this work really in ways that are about the whole person, ourselves as whole persons, and doing it in a way that is really for all. So the conversation that we want to have today is really, what are places across the country that are really trying to have this for all young people and for the adults that care about them? And what are those kind of places that we can look to that are really those shining lights? And so you're going to hear from California, which is the Department of Education, one of the first places in the country that really has that kind of dedicated funding around after school and out of school time to be able to really scale this work in California, but with that real commitment to equity in that work. Sort of here in Austin, one of the leading lights in the school district here is social emotional learning, and a real commitment to equity there. And then primetime Palm Beach County, one of the oldest really out of school time systems in the country that has been working also more recently on social emotional learning and how to make that more explicit and how to be able to really do that work in partnership. This is our conversation. These are our panelists, and I'm going to let you first start just by introducing yourselves and giving us, in the shortest form, like, what is actually your day job? Before we get to your storytelling, you wear a lot of hats, but what is your day job? Michael?
Is California in the house? California? Not many of us, I have to give a shout out. My day, well, I have to say I'm a lifelong youth worker, and 5 years ago when our state superintendent elevated the work of after school and summer into its own division and asked me to come lead that, I have been charged in the last 5 years to work collaboratively with the field, which in California means a little over 4,500 programs and 860,000 children, to shift the role of the State Department of Education from compliance first to performance and coaching to quality first. It's been quite a journey for 5 years, but that is my day job.
Suzette.
Hi, good morning. Suzette Harvey, President and CEO of Primetime Palm Beach County. I've been with the organization 11 years, and we are the state's only independent nonprofit at a school-time intermediary. We serve about 20,000 children, approximately 1,500 practitioners, and 250 programs just in Palm Beach County.
I'm Edmund Oropez. I'm the Chief Officer for Teaching and Learning for the Austin Independent School District, which means that I look over 130 campuses, 84,000 students in all academic programming, athletics, academic program, everything like there. So I wear a lot of different hats. Basically, I'm number 2 underneath the superintendent, Dr. Paul Cruz, and great job. I love being here in Austin. I love working for the Austin Independent School District.
So when we were prepping for this conversation today, we said we're going to do a little storytelling. We're going to start off with kind of the short story, kind of the snapshot in a way, of the path that brought you here, focusing on social emotional learning, equality, and really that where does the focus on kind of equity come into that work? And we thought we'd go through it really looking at the state level story, and from California first, and then coming through from school district, and then looking in the out-of-school time space. So we're going to start off with our short stories, and then really move into a conversation. So Michael, can you kick us off?
Yeah, happy to. Excuse me, I was inspired by Karen and Sean's stories yesterday, and so I've totally changed what I was going to open with.
3 times.
Yeah, and I was going to tell the California story, but I think I'm going to tell my story. A little personal, because I was moved by the presentations yesterday. I've recently heard Karen and Sean speak at a different event, but just a little bit about what social emotional means to me. We've been talking a lot about the contrast between the achievement gap and the opportunity gap. And I really appreciated Karen's emphasis on the fact that opportunities are not clearly equitable opportunities unless they're quality. And I can say more about that in terms of California's scale and our real struggle for quality over the last several years. But for me personally, I've got 3 boys. My oldest is 29, twins 22 from a previous marriage. We're very, very close. Was on the phone with them a couple times this week. But about 10 years ago, I got together with a youth development colleague for lunch, and we decided to live together and get married. So,
Over lunch?
it was a really productive lunch.
It's over lunch.
And we decided to start a family.
This wasn't in the phone call.
So we went through a process over a long period of time to be certified to adopt out of foster care. And I won't go into this, it's a whole other story, but we actually went through a process of long search. And long story short, I had just taken this post and had been in Sacramento about 6 months, was commuting from San Francisco, where we'd both worked for decades. And they introduced us to Janae at the Sacramento County Office of Social Services. And we fell in love with Janae. She was 2, and we agreed for her to be our daughter. And so in this 4-year journey, we've been really mindful about introducing Janae to her story, and that she's got, she's got a birth mother, a birth father, and she's got a forever daddy and a forever father. But I'm going to switch back to this narrative about the opportunity gap. I've been thinking about the last 6 months that what we're really struggling with in education is a love gap. Somehow we've left off the ability to use the word love in education. And so I've been on this journey in the last, 6 months to introduce that word, into our conversations, and give us permission to use that word when we talk about equity and what our kids need. Because so often we talk about social emotional in terms of behavioral management, but what we're really talking about is that our kids need love. But something happened in the last 4 days that has shifted that narrative for me. So Janae has been begging for a puppy for about 4 years, and I just said no. I grew up on a farm. I know dogs. I know this. We can't add one more element to our life. And then last weekend I gave in. And we went to the shelter rescue outside of Sacramento, and we looked at puppies, and we met this puppy who had a foster mom, and we talked to the foster mom. And could we put the picture up on the screen, please? So we met Twinkle. And this was a very important part of this narrative, that Janae not only needed love, but she needed to love. And her narrative now, this was last Saturday in a park in Sacramento, is that, yes, this little puppy didn't have a home. It was found on a roadside in Modesto in a box. And Janae's narrative is now, this is going to be my forever puppy. And she, the problem is the puppy bonded with me. And so for the first couple of days, Janae was all jealous when the puppy would snuggle with me. She'd snuggle over here. And so I was really glad to come to Austin and get some sleep. But I tell that story to say that what's profoundly important for my story and the story for California is how do we bring the experience to our most stressed children, the children who've been traumatized the most, and not only love them, but to give them the opportunity to love themselves. And I'll try to tell more as we talk on our panel about what that means structurally, what that means in our systems, and what that means in California.
Thank you, Mike. So it's about a warm puppy. How do you make that happen in a system? And we will come back to the California story, but let's bring it down to the ground for a moment and tell us how in Austin, in the school district, did you even start trying to bring that into the school system and make it happen across the entire system? What was the impetus for that?
Well, first, there's a golden rule of speaking: never follow kids and puppies. I mean, how do you top that, Michael? Thank you for that.
And we said no PowerPoint slides, and he came in this morning and said, I have a PowerPoint slide.
Nice. But, what's interesting, you mentioned, Michael, love. And we, here in Austin, we've been on this 6-year journey on SEL. And we started just so the impetus was we had some funders that really believed very, very strongly that we needed to really become a kinder, gentler district, and really looking at the lens that we became a tale of two cities. We have a city in Austin, very much a tale of two cities. We're a very high-performing urban district, but we also have huge achievement gaps as well. And so It was through the vision of some of our community members and our funders that said, what if we start looking at it through this lens, through a lens of social emotional learning, that we could really break down some of these walls and barriers and become a kinder, gentler district that could support all our students. And the reason why I mentioned about the love, because one of the things in teaching that we've lost is we've taken the emotion, we've taken the passion, we've taken love out of it, and we've tried to make it scientific and step by step by step. And we've lost the art, and we've lost the emotion. We're trying to bring that back here in the Austin Independent School District. That's what we're trying to do to reach all our students and really teach our organization, our teachers, people like myself, that it's important that we don't lose sight that some of the experiences that our kids are feeling and they're going through, they impact their ability to learn. We jump right away to the mechanics of teaching reading. And we jump right away to numeracy and literacy and all these things, and we forget that it's about that relationship building, that how we're able to build those relationships and connect with individuals and understand and acknowledge the experiences that kids are going through that are going to impact their ability to learn. One of the things that's evolved now in our 6th year of going through this is while we were studying children and the impact, we forgot about the adults. And the impacts that every one of our adults, our 12,000 people that come to work every single day, that they too, we have to recognize that their experiences that are impacting their lives affect how they're able to impact children's lives. So that's our evolution that we're going through currently right now, is studying how leaders, how their reactions affect things. I'll give you a real example of what we were discussing yesterday. I had our fellowship meeting yesterday all day long. I'm looking at James Butler because he was there, and you'll hear James later on speak. He's really a remarkable individual. But what we talked about when we talk about like SEL competencies, one of them is self-awareness. And one of the things that we lose sight, like as school leaders, is we teach self-awareness, but we don't realize we have to be self-aware. And one of the things I was sharing with the group is that we, as leaders, we're sometimes not mindful that when you walk in the room, you're someone's boss, and they react to you differently. So you might say something to someone that you're just saying casually, but you don't even realize what impact it actually has on them. And so we're trying to pull back now and really teach our leaders, teach our teachers the SEL competencies in the way that how they'll be able to not just internalize it, but understand their impact on learning in every single day as we're not only working together as adults, but as we're impacting our children as they learn. So this is the journey that we've been on. It's a remarkable journey. It's one that we're very proud of. We very much are aware that this is going to be our vehicle to really, when we study equity, when we look at the have and the have-nots, equity to us means access, really. The ability to access, that everyone has the same ability to access everything out there. And we're looking to as our SEL competencies, our SEL training, to really, really provide that equity and access to all our students, not just our students, but all the adults in the system. But it's really, they've been passionate conversations, and it's been a fun journey, and we look forward to seeing how this evolves. And that's what we're calling it. It's the evolution of our SEL journey here in Austin.
Thank you, Edmund. Thank you. We're going to come back and dig into how you make love and relationship building systemic a little bit and kind of unpack that a little bit more. But tell us how you started on this path with Primetime as well.
So our journey, I think, has been long, but SEL equity has sort of been the undergirding this work since the early days. So before even Primetime was started, back in the late 90s, a few decision makers looked around Palm Beach County and were really concerned about the uneven quality in after-school and summer programming. If you know anything about our county, it's 60 miles outside of, north of Miami, but the wealth disparity is enormous. I mean, we have the island of Palm Beach, where I think my colleague Tammy Fields called it the winter White House. So you have incredible wealth along the coast, and you would drive an hour just across town, and you have Belle Glade, where they cut sugarcane. You know, we have migrant workers, median income is $26,000. So you have that in one county, one school system. So, you know, late 90s, looking around, some very smart people said, we need to look at this systematically. The Children's Services Council of Palm Beach County stepped up, formed Prime Time in the year 2000. And one of the key partners there, and still a founding member, was from the school district. So we had school district support at the very beginning of this work, realizing that we are all serving children, just serving children differently. So we began our work immediately looking at the opportunity gap way back then. So we had brought in activities for after-school programs that couldn't afford them. So it really was addressing equity right in the beginning, because we have wealth in our communities, but it was very uneven, lots of pockets of poverty. Where about 2004, we said, you know what, we really need to do this systematically, and wanted to get some standards that are appropriate for our community, and did a real grassroots effort to first look at standards that were available from around the country, you know, don't reinvent the wheel, and then we surveyed about 1,800 parents, brought in 200 frontline workers as well as directors, looked at the standards, reviewed them, went out and tried to find a tool that would help us measure these standards. After some work, we landed on the YPQA, and we made a version of our own. So we had the Palm Beach County Program Assessments. We've been working with the Weichert Center for a really long time, so they helped us create a tool that really worked for our community. Starting off, we had 36 programs who volunteered to be in a quality improvement system, understanding that quality really matters, getting back to what Karen was talking about yesterday. At the heart of our work is really about adult practice. We understand that the end result is to have greater outcomes for children. But prime time sweet spot is about adult practice. So we have really staffed up with incredible professional development and quality coaches to support the adults in the room to know who they are, so they just exactly what you were talking about. That is our sweet spot, and then they're able to translate that work with children. So we have a career advisor. So we talk about equity. We meet you where you are, but it's not about telling you what you need to do. You say, these are what I would like to achieve. This is what I want to do. You are the expert. We are here to support you, and I think that's the difference of giving people fish. We're teaching them how to fish. So that is all of our work. So you fast forward that to 2017, we've grown to 147 programs in our Quality Improvement Center. Children's Services Council is still the primary funder of Prime Time. We are doing some work with middle school thanks to Palm Beach County, so we're working with the Youth Services Department. And now we are part of this Wallace work that's looking at social and emotional learning more systematically. We'll be able to name it. We're having a strong partnership with our school district, although they've been partners all along, but it's been parallel systems. And now we're looking at putting this together, realizing there are same children, and we want that adult interaction to be the same throughout the day. And we're looking at changing practice and policy. And that's really where we're getting that. So, you know, the interesting part is, how do we bring the OST staff together with teachers? Because we're coming at it two different, ways. Ours is sort of, we like to say, this low stakes. We have a different level of accountability. We're all about try and fail it. That's what after school and summer learning is all about. Giving children a voice, letting them explore, letting them learn to lead. So it's, we need to bring that together and take the best of both of our worlds to the benefit of children.
So we start with love. We move into relationship building, and we're going to really nuts and bolts in terms of what it takes to make that happen in terms of adult practice and the system kind of behind that. Okay. This is as you're describing for us, kind of what that system kind of looks like and how you're building that out. So, Michael and Eb, can you flesh out your pictures a little bit? How do you systematize love and relationship building?
Well, first of all, the challenge, California's story, to walk through how we moved from $50 million in state funding in '97 to Arnold Schwarzenegger's proposition in 2002 to the trigger of $550 million in 2006. It's almost the epitome of how to do something the wrong way. You know, in terms of, there was a complex trigger. The proposition was passed in 2002. There was a complex trigger about when the money would be released. And we waited several years, and we heard from the state controller that the money was going to be triggered. It was in May of 2006. The money's going to drop in July. So in May, we heard our state funding was going to move from $126 million to $550 million. Programs had to be up in September. We don't have a lot of school districts that are really good at planning in July. So this was tough work. And so we had an equity issue. We had a quality issue. And we had lots of programs that were not staffed with quality staff. They didn't quite know how to do this in a quality way. So we worked for a long time in terms of, you know, the first conversation was, how are we defining quality? There are some folks here in the room that worked hard to convene a statewide group to come up with what many states have, but it's our California version of quality standards. Because I don't know about you, but for a long time, as I ran programs in San Francisco, the discussion about quality was about test scores. And for a long time, the discussion of quality was about behavioral management. And so I think for us, we had to say, first of all, what is quality? And then a couple of years ago, we authored and got passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, SB 1226. Among many things that bill did was to strip out a lot of the old accountability measures for our after-school programs and summer programs, including test scores, and require every site to do a continuous quality improvement process, data-driven, based on the quality standards. And the key was, at the sacrifice of being able to aggregate information up to the state, we said the choice of how you collect data and what you use for your assessment is going to be locally driven. I wasn't going to go into Oakland, which has a very sophisticated process using the PQA, and say you're going to use a different tool. And I wasn't going to go to a program in Happy Camp, California, Indian Village, remote mountains, and say you're going to have to use something like PQA, when for them a parent survey and a spaghetti dinner with a focus group would provide good data on what they could do to improve. But the key was it was also low stakes for high impact. We said to the programs, you can't fail if you try. This quality improvement process is not going to be turned into the state. We're not going to come with a clipboard and look at it. It is yours. And when my staff show up, or when the 70 other people that we have in our statewide system of support for quality show up at your site, we'll ask to see your plan, so it's a point of discussion. But let me tell you, that all sounds, so that's what we try to do at a systems level, to try to shift the focus on quality from compliance across a system of that scale. We got the data back a couple weeks ago, and for programs to report how they did with their first year at trying to do a continuous quality improvement process. What we're finding is it's really hard for programs to believe that we're not going to show up with a clipboard and hit them over the head. It's really hard for programs to believe that this really is low stakes for high impact. It's hard for programs to believe that the state is here to support you, not to catch you doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. And we're slowly making progress. But our big challenge, and what I'm here to absorb and learn from programs, districts and intermediaries who are really taking quality at a deep level and know how to really coach people into quality and know how to work with classroom teachers. I'll stop there, but I think for some other reasons, California has changed the way funding goes to districts and has given most of the control for how districts spend funding, and has set 8 priorities for districts that they have to include in their plan. One of them is school climate and culture. And one of the measurements, one of the accountability measurements that the state has adopted for ESSA is school climate and culture. And I'm telling you, that has changed the conversation between school day folks and expanded learning folks to see here's a common place. Because we've been doing this youth development stuff for a couple of decades. The safe environment, the supportive relationships. And I think for the first time in my career, we're seeing a conversation between educators and expanded learning professionals that really has coherence and an opportunity for collaboration down the road.
How much are you seeing that in the work that you're doing, and how to really kind of take it's sort of a conversation around trust that you're talking about. So how you're building a space of actually trusting that what we're saying we want to promote is what we want to promote, and that folks that are doing the work on the front line will actually trust that this is what you want to share. How did you build that in your systems, when whether it was doing continuous quality improvement or moving SEL throughout an entire school district? How do you build that kind of trust in a system?
Well, it is about trust, and we're still building it, so we're not there yet completely. But it's about blending it with the research. What we've done now is we've evolved SEL now is to connect it to the brain research, trauma research that's going on, and really allowing the space for our teachers, our principals that are at the front lines is to really have faith in that and believe in it. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we've done two things that are connected to SEL this year, which we passed a mandatory 30-minute recess policy at our elementaries that allows our kids to have 30 minutes of recess going through. It was real clear when we looked at the body of research out there that it was important the kids have time to play and really to actualize SEL, the competencies that they're learning, but do it with each other and going out there. It was a bit controversial for us here, and we took an aggressive stance, and our school board supported it. The second one that we did, was looking again through the body of research out there, is banning pre-K through second grade suspensions. We were suspending kids and we were suspending kids, and they were predominantly African American Hispanic kids. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. I mean, it's real clear, sending a child in trauma home is the wrong thing to do. And it was with a lot of controversy. There was a split camp, even within our organization. Going back to trust, why this is that when we send those signals like that we're taking bold stances, we're sending a signal to the organization, to our teachers, to our principals, that we truly believe this. And we believe in this work, and it creates spaces for them to be innovative and believe as well. That we're not just talking in terms of SEL and equity, we're actually putting things in action. And so that's the kind of journey we're on right now in Austin, that we're continuing, refining, and looking and creating those spaces for our teachers to believe and take chances. When we say, we have a very strict accountability system in Texas, it's test-driven. Well, our message to our campus is that, yes, we understand we have the accountability system. But what was happening is that they were doing SEL lessons in isolation. And it was like, okay, we're going to do our SEL lesson, and then we're going to teach math. Now this evolution that we're doing is an integration of the two. And I'll give you a real-world example. This is a real lesson that we're doing. So we have a science lesson in the 5th grade that our kids are going through, and we blend SEL and mindfulness in it and saying, look, this is going to be a very difficult concept that we're going to learn today, and we're going to struggle. So letting the kids know it's okay to struggle. It's okay. You're in a safe space. Now let's remember what we do. Let's do our breathing. I'm looking at James because James preaches a lot about breathing. And so to tell the kids before we begin the lesson, let's get into the space. Let's take our deep breaths. Let's get ready to go. And then we'll start going through the lesson. And be mindful that we are going to struggle, and it's okay to struggle. It's okay to make mistakes that way. So it's creating that infrastructure throughout a system, a large system like we are in Austin. And really we're seeing it now take root, and really it's starting to grow and grow and grow. But it is about building the trust that the leadership of the district, myself and our superintendent, that we're not going to talk in one way, but our actions are going to be something else. And that's beginning to bridge that gap in building those trusts.
I think for prime time, we The leadership that formed this organization was very, very intentional by separating compliance and quality. So we do not fund any after-school programs, which puts us in a great position to be a real support and being able to have honest and authentic dialogues at the site level. They may not happen if we were also the funder. I know that's not the case. Many intermediaries around the country, I'm part of Every Hour Counts. I'm a very proud member of that organization, and we look at system building differently. We all learn from each other, but that's a piece, I think, another sweet spot for prime time. So when we launched this work, once it was voluntary, and so you tell them this is not going back to the funder, the scores are not being made public, and we're really going to focus on those areas where you can improve. And the data has shown if you're going to concentrate on 2 or 3 areas, which we try to limit that, you will show improvement over a year's time. We'll come back and do an assessment. But I really want to talk about that importance of creating a system. So we started with the standards. Then we align those to core competencies. Although we have state competencies, we have Palm Beach County competencies. We align those to the tool. All of our trainings, if you take a primetime training, it will indicate which competencies, and they all go back to the standards. So everything is in alignment, and that takes time. So the issue of having to launch programs, puts you in a state where you can't really look at quality. And I'm really blessed that I have a funder, a supporter that allowed us to make mistakes, really believed in continuous quality improvement. So we just don't, we walk the talk. So we look at our work. If we're doing something wrong, and we're not wrong, but if we need something to be changed, then we have the flexibility to change it. And then we learn that over time. And another thing, we immediately, when we first launched the quality improvement system, we got an outside evaluator. And we did a process evaluator with Chapin Hall, and we looked at that data closely, and we've made changes. So I think that we had the luxury of time, knowing that it's not punitive. So for our providers, you have to have a meeting with your quality advisor and do assessment. Doesn't matter your scores, that's not the issue. It's that you're in the game. So if you're not making progress, you're always making progress because you're in the game. And you're taking your training. The trainings are not even mandatory. Nothing is mandatory, and people show up. We have people on the waiting list. They show up. They understand that quality matters, but I think it's over time. So we've started this in a long time. They had to have a certain level of comfort with prime time and knowing that we're really here to support.
I want to pick up on this. There's so much systemic work that's happening around quality and around and you've talked about kind of the kind of infusion of the social emotional learning work. Sort of it's not 2 o'clock. One of your colleagues in the work always tells me it's like how to say it's not 2 o'clock on Tuesdays, that you're kind of taking it out of a box, but you're really it is about self-reflection, and it is about self-management. It is about love, and it is about like integration, but intentional integration into all that we're doing. What are the ways that you really are systemically, again, but infusing, helping adults and students and young people in the front line, infusing social emotional learning into your quality work, into the classroom, moving it throughout your out of school time and summer work in California? How is it being infused into that work in a really intentional, integrative way?
Well, I think I love the examples of the very tangible policy examples you've done with your district in terms of suspensions and play, and the intentional work that you've done about non-punitive quality coaching. I think for me, the fact that we're starting to talk about school climate and culture, Peter Senge's work talks about the social field is as important as the artifacts of the system and this culture. And the fact that we're having that conversation now really gets us from social emotional as behavioral management or social emotional as something that I teach Tuesday at 2. This has been a conversation, and I think I've seen the gravity in some educational systems that every initiative has to boil down to a new curriculum that we get in a box and then someone's assigned to teach it, but this is more something that's spread. And I think about how this is integrated with staff. At some point in your education, we were all exposed to Maslow's hierarchy of need. And what we know is that our children, we know all of us as humans, if we're concerned with our basic needs or safety, we're not going to get up to the higher levels of self-actualization. I think the same is a barrier for quality. If our program staff are worried about their safety, am I going to be caught out of compliance? Am I going to get dinged somehow for not doing something the right way? They're not going to find this higher level of existing and being, because as social emotional, this notion of if we're really going to love kids, it's about bringing ourselves, I think it was said earlier, bringing our whole selves, who we are as humans, to interact with other little humans in a way that is compassionate and loving and nurtures them through a process of discovery. And if either the adult or the child in the room are somehow concerned about being in compliance or safety or following the rules, if our social emotional is about teaching kids how to get through my class because they follow the rules or not get thrown out of my program because they've obeyed the rules, that's compliance as opposed to the transformative work. And so I think we owe ourselves, in addition to setting the right policies and the right messages that communicate what a healthy, loving climate is, we also have to make sure that we're coaching people into success when it comes to compliance so they don't have to worry about that. And so I've been really intentional about sending my staff out. Before they do a compliance visit, you're going to go out and be in contact with that program and make sure they're coached up so they're into compliance before you show up. And I think taking that fear out of the system for both the adults and the children is really essential for culture.
Let me add to this question too, as you're doing, because I think that's really helpful. And I think one of the things I've heard you all talk about, and we haven't touched on as much today, is the importance of partnerships in this work, and how, and especially as children are going across multiple places throughout their day, from schools into out of school time and home and all the different places that they spend their time, like what it looks like to really do this work across different systems and with different partners. And when you start talking about things like, we worked really hard on our standards, and then I know in your work, and now you're working with another system who also worked really hard on their standards and are having that conversation together. Partnership work is hard work. Why is it essential in this space? Why tackle that?
Well, I think coming from prime time and the process, I believe in systems. So we just went through a master youth planning process with the forum. The leadership of our community saw it's almost parallel, saw there was a need, and then we had a really grassroots effort. So in the OST space, we've taken leadership, but working with Tammy Fields and the Palm Beach State Youth Services Council as a department, as a primary partner, and the school district and the Children's Service Council of Palm Beach County, we have created goals that cross all these areas. So I think we're taking the learnings from what we've done in OST and sort of transferring that work within this huge planning process. 60 organizations, there's a lot of work there, but I think that you have to take the time to sit and go through the work. You have to go out to the community. You have to know what the gaps are. You have to look at them, and you can't be afraid of the conversation. we are using that work to inform our work. So there is an OST work group. So we have worked in the silo, working with our practitioners, and now we get to work with others who are looking at social emotional learning across many different fields. So I'm, working with foster kids is something we haven't done. Working with juvenile justice, really looking at the needs of special needs. So we're bringing many more people to the table that can benefit from the process that we have gone through in, looking at standards, connecting, training, going to outcomes. So we're really hoping that through this process, we can be a resource as well as can learn at a county-wide. This is a county-wide effort that we've been involved in.
Michael, with PCY in California, what's the partnership piece been?
Yeah, the Partnership for Children and Youth has done a great 360, 365 on social and emotional learning. They've boiled it down into something simple. I am, I belong, and I can. The fact that I can just remember that tells you it's sticky and it's effective. And we've partnered with them very closely. And in fact, in their work, they're doing a community of practice with a subset of the largest districts in the state of California: LA, San Francisco, Oakland, Fresno, Long Beach, the small ones like that.
Little tiny ones.
Where the districts have actually brought teams together. The requirement was that the team had to have a cross-section of district representation, including expanded learning. And they've committed to come together over several years to plan on how they're going to implement social emotional learning across their district, including involving all the partners. I've actually started joining those meetings. The Oakland group is here. So I can learn from them. And on April 10th, we're launching our own social emotional strategy group for expanded learning to try to figure out. So we're bringing in about 20 people from across the state. Katie Brackenridge here from Partnership for Children and Youth is co-chairing that with me. And, I'm thinking about how do we take this work that's happening really meaningfully in 10 districts and expanding that throughout other districts in the state. I walked into the room skeptical because here's like 6 people from Los Angeles Unified, and I'm thinking, how can you 6 people do anything to change the system at Los Angeles Unified School District? But they had the right people in the conversation. So the person who's in charge of setting up the rubric for evaluating the performance of site administrators was in the room. So they're changing the rubric for how site administrators are evaluated to include social, emotional, and expanded learning. That can make a system's change in a system that large. So the fact is that I knew that to shift things in the state of California, we had to develop partnerships with organizations like Partnership for Children and Youth. But let me tell you, for the first many years, what that meant inside my department was a threat. Because people within state government, there was a subset of people, and I know this is possibly being recorded out there. Turn off your phones. The fact that I wanted to bring in someone from the outside to co-plan, many people interpreted that as I don't trust them, because the typical culture for the state is we're going to go work up a plan, we'll ask you what you think about it, and maybe we'll do something, and then we'll... So you mentioned trust throughout the system. The real thing that took, literally, I think I might have hit the tipping point 6 months ago. It was almost 5 years in development where I felt like we hit a place where we were actually working together with trust. And we couldn't do it without partnering with organizations like yours and districts like yours, because that's where the real innovation happens. The best thing I can do at the state level is get out of the way and let innovation flow and grow organically.
Helpful. We were going to take any burning questions for the audience. We had a wrap up about kind of politics and the path forward. But if we've got any questions, I think we have a mic. or we can go with politics and the path forward. But it really is that sort of like, it's interesting times. And really think about it, what is the path forward in terms of this work? And just, you mentioned kind of resources and money and policy and politics and all these, it weaves through the story. What is the advice for this group of hard-working folks as we navigate the path ahead? What do you think are those kind of words of wisdom? What should we really be focusing on as we just head into this year to come?
I would say what we've learned is be very public about your work. And we've announced this is who we are, this is not what we do, this is who we are. And we've changed our policies, whether it's our theory of teaching and learning, which includes the social emotional competencies. So it's very public to announce, and we talk about it openly. That way they can hold us accountable for our actions that we're doing. And that's extremely important. I was glad to hear what you said, Michael, about the state getting out of the way. I hope you talk to Texas a little bit, and we would welcome that conversation here in Texas.
Partners at all levels.
But it is important that you get the right people in the room, too. The reason why our SEL has really taken root here in Austin is because our leadership, myself, the superintendent, we lead the effort. It's not just I say, hey, our SEL people go do this. I'm in the room with them. We're there, we're spending the time working together and making it very publicly known that this is important to us. This is changing, and again, changing that from what we do to actually who we are. That's changing the culture. That's extremely important in changing the culture.
Closing word of advice.
My answer probably would have been a little different a couple of months ago, but now I would, and Merita's not prompting me at all, but I think now we really need to look at that 1 o'clock session on sustainability for our field. We are focused on quality. I'm blessed to be in a community that has resources through a Children's Services Council, which is something that the voters has set up to support programs for children and youth, but that's not the case everywhere. I have colleagues around this country who are really concerned about the loss of federal funding for our 21st century programs. I mean, that is huge. So I think that, you have to speak in time, and politically, that's what's on our mind in the OSD space. We need to really concern about sustainability.
Yeah, I'll surf on that. I just wanted to thank the President's Budget Director for claiming that 21st century programs have no impact on student performance, because it has released a flood of press and stories, including Anderson Cooper 360, one of the great stories about a program in Georgia. I've been telling folks in California, yes, we have to be mindful. This is a real threat, but our best defense against the threat is an offense. Mm-hmm. Stand on quality. Stand up for what you do. Learn how to tell your story. I think this is challenging us to be more precise and more strategic in telling the story of what we do to constituents who now listen. And I also am even though we're, the left coast, we have something with 21st century that other federal programs don't have, and that is, for most states, for government funding for after school, 21st century is all they got, and they love it. And we have 50 states that can unite around the folks that, loving children is not political. And this funding helps us do that. And I'm telling folks in California, it's business as usual. In about sometime Monday or Tuesday next week, we'll announce the results of the winners of Cohort 10 for 21st century, and we're moving forward.
Stand up for what you do and tell your story.